I should wear my glasses to look more intellectual. No. Absolutely. Hi, it's Milla, and when the phone mic comes out, that's when you know we're getting serious. I got so many requests on my last book video, the best and worst books I read in 2023, to do a sequel or another book-related video, and ask and you shall receive. I was very happy to oblige. I love books so much, and I'm always happy to talk about them for hours and hours on end. So today's video is going to be my favorite books of all time so far, because I'm only 18 and what do I know about my favorite books of all time if I haven't even lived all my time yet. But anyways, you will notice that I have extremely eclectic taste. I like what I like, okay? And these are books that I've come back to time and time again that either had me going absolutely feral and reading till 1 in the morning, or that left me sobbing, questioning my existence. You know the drill. So without further ado, here are my favorite books of all time. I'm gonna I'm gonna talk about them in chronological order of when I read them. So there's no like number one favorite book, because don't ask me to choose. I can't choose. I'm a Gemini. Oh my god, I can't believe I just said that. I have absolutely no outline or notes of what I'm going to talk about in this video. I did for my last book-related video. I had a whole Google Doc, so forgive me if I'm a little all over the place. The first book we're going to start with the book that started it all for me, that started my passion of reading when I was 6 years old. And no, for those of you who know me, it is not Harry Potter. It is Black Beauty by Anna Sewell. This book, first of all, I have the most gorgeous vintage edition that my grandmother gave me. And my grandmother is actually the one who would read me this book when I was around 6. And it really is what started my love of reading. Here's my gorgeous 6-year-old handwriting. This book is a children's classic. I'm sure most of you already know the story. It's about a horse. That's all I can really say. It's about a horse called Black Beauty, about his life as a horse. And yeah, just a very heartwarming classic book. Just gives me the absolute best memories of my grandmother, and I always remember to write her an email when I think about this book. Cannot wait to force my own children to read this and pass it down through the generations. Now let's get to when I started forming my identity, my sense of self, and my taste in books. The first book that I would say really started to define what I genuinely liked versus what was kind of just handed to me is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. This book I read in 5th grade. Should I have been reading this book at 10 years old? Debatable, but I did, and I absolutely fell in love with it. It's basically set in post-Spanish Civil War Barcelona. It's about Daniel, who is the son of a bookseller. His mother passed away of cholera, I think, when he was very young, only around 5 years old. And the book starts when he's 10 and ends when he's around 18. When he's 10, Daniel's father takes him to this mysterious place called the Cemetery of Forgotten Books. And when he's there, his father tells him to pick out any book, and he must keep it safe and cherish it for the rest of his life. He picks out a book called The Shadow of the Wind by an author that he's never heard of called Julián Carax. He reads it, he absolutely devours it in one night, but then he's visited by this shadowy figure who is after all of Carax's books, and someone is trying to destroy all the remaining copies of this mysterious, never heard of before author's books. It's very much a gothic novel, very dramatic and over the top and kind of like film noir-esque, which I love. I eat that up any day. This is the book that made me want to visit Barcelona since I was 10 years old. Just the way that Zafón describes the city, it's a love letter to Barcelona. All of his books are love letters to Barcelona. When I did my sort of pilgrimage of this book in Barcelona this summer with my mom, I would be reading it and then I would look up at street names and I'd be like, oh my god, I'm on Calle Santa Ana right now. Like, this is crazy. My goal is now to read it in Spanish in its original language, which is my 3rd language, but I have read in Spanish before, so I think I can do it. But So far, I've only read it in English, and I think I can only really appreciate the true beauty of a book in its original language. The next book is probably the most YA book on this roster, but you know what? There's nothing wrong with YA. And that book is We Are Okay by Nina LaCour. Short but sweet, absolutely heartbreaking, but beautiful and heartwarming in the best way. How can I really describe it? Basically, it's about this girl called Marin. She kind of escapes to her college dorms early before her freshman year starts. Although you kind of only really put together the pieces as the book progresses, you can tell that she's fleeing a lot of grief, a lot of loss, and the book kind of takes place sort of in the current time period when she's in her New York City college dorm, and then flashbacks to when she's in sunny California and everything is good. It's very cinematic in a way, and kind of reminds me of in movies where the current time is kind of like the colors are dark and sad and colder blue colors, and then the flashbacks are warm and sunny and bright. And I think if a book can really make you picture everything so cinematically, it's really well written. One of the best coming of age books I've ever read in my life. I highly recommend if you want something easy to read that you will definitely get emotionally invested in, and like I said, that will leave you kind of questioning everything. It's almost disturbing in a way when one final reveal happens, but in a way that, I don't know, just really breaks your heart and then mends it back together again. My foot is falling asleep. For this next book, I don't want to hear a thing. I don't want to hear a word. It is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. That's right, I said it. I know it's basic, and not to be that person, but I did kind of read it before it was popular. I don't even know if this book needs an introduction. It's probably one of the most book-talked books of all time, but I love it. I think it is absolutely worth the hype. But like I said, I read it kind of before there was so much hype, so maybe if I read it after the book talk hype, I wouldn't have liked it as much. Basically, it's about this Hollywood icon, Evelyn Hugo, who has been completely private and reclusive her entire retired life. And she specifically requests this up-and-coming journalist, Monique, to tell her story. It will be a tell-all. She will reveal everything, but only to Monique. The story, again, is one of those books that takes place in 2 different time periods. The current time period is Evelyn telling Monique her story and kind of the sort of strained interactions between the 2 women that is just so fascinating. And then obviously the past time period, which is about Evelyn's life. I love this book so much. I think it's a masterpiece in storytelling. Yes, I do think so. Is it chick lit? Maybe. Is there anything wrong with chick lit? Absolutely not. It made me cry again. I'll read it again and again and be shocked every single time. Beautiful love story, unexpected. There's morally gray characters. My foot is literally falling asleep. The characters are morally gray, but you still love them. Tells you so much about love. I don't know. I think it's beautiful. I also love old Hollywood. I love black and white movies. I love the era that Evelyn Hugo would have starred in. So that's also just like a me thing. It is one of my favorite books of all time. I think it is one of the books that really got me back into reading after a little long slump. I do think it is absolutely worth the hype. My next book, this is kind of like, dare I say, mom literature, not in an insulting way. This is like Reese Witherspoon book club, but I think, again, it's absolutely worth the hype. And that book is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. It is a masterpiece. Honestly, it's so gorgeously done, so masterfully done. They did make a TV show out of it, which I've only seen 1 or 2 episodes of and didn't really follow through on it, but the book is always better. Basically, it is about this close-knit suburban community that gets blown wide apart when a mother-daughter duo, Mia and Pearl, enter their town. There's just so many different storylines going on in one book, which I absolutely love. I love subplots upon subplots upon subplots. At first, you expect it to be kind of like, I don't know, a sort of soapy family drama in a way, and again, not in an insulting way, but then it reveals itself to be like a super nuanced, subtle kind of I don't know, examination of race in the United States, and it's so good. At first, it started off a little slow, and I wasn't really sure what it would make itself out to be, but it's absolutely amazing, super well done, really the work of a master writer, if you ask me. This is one of those books that kind of got me more into adult literature. I read it when I was like maybe 15, 16, maybe younger, maybe older. I honestly don't know. It has so many different perspectives on this one moral dilemma that if you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. It's not exactly a spoiler, but I just won't say it because I want you to uncover it for yourself. And then, of course, there's like, you know, love stories and mother-daughter kind of tensions, and everything literally goes up in flames, and I loved it. This next book is the only classic in my collection, but I think it is absolutely not a boring classic, absolutely something worth reading, and that book is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. Say what you will about Virginia Woolf. Her writing style is definitely not for everybody, and she obviously definitely has a lot of very, you know, I don't know, like problematic ways of thinking because she literally lived and died a century ago. But anyways, Mrs. Dalloway is one of those classics that I forced myself to read when I was about 16 because I was like, I need to be well read, I need to be a classics girl. And it really surprised me because I never thought that a classic could be so engaging and so not boring. That being said, this book is about nothing. It is kind of boring, but it's about nothing and everything at the same time. So to give you a little synopsis of it, it's about Mrs. Dalloway, Clarissa Dalloway, who is a 1920s, you know, socialite housewife who's throwing a party. The whole book is set in one afternoon and one evening, and it's about Mrs. Dalloway getting ready to throw her party, buying flowers, talking to people, inviting people, remembering things. And there's also another perspective, which is that of a war veteran. This book is written in 1923, 25, I'm not quite sure, just a few years after the First World War. So there's also the perspective of a war vet. This book is one of those books that's like classical music in a way, where it starts off super slowly and then, you know, just the orchestra builds up, there's a crescendo, and then I don't know how else to say it, but it is so beautiful. Definitely one of those books that have me questioning everything, that I recommend if you want to get into classics but you don't know where to start. Miss Wolf's writing is very dense, but once you get through it and you really understand what's going on, you will absolutely love it, and it will leave you questioning everything, like I keep saying. I actually did not read this edition for the first time. This is one that I found at a thrift store. The first edition that I read was borrowed from my school's library, and it actually had annotations in it, which definitely helped my reading. So thank you, whoever, you know, vandalized a library book. But it's one of those books that I could write essays on. It's just, little did I know while filming this that I would be writing essays about this book because it's on the reading list for my English class this semester. So stay tuned. Absolutely beautiful, so well written. Such like social and human commentary, and it's deceiving. It seems like it's boring and frivolous and just about this woman throwing a party, but it's so much more than that, and it's definitely the book that got me into Virginia Woolf. Now, these next two books I have talked about on my channel before, and they deserve to be spoken about again. These books I read last year. The first one I talked about in my last book video. If you can guess what it is, you get a cookie. I don't know. Drum roll, please. It is The Idiot by Elif Batuman. I just love this book so much. I mean, I'll re-describe it here again, but you can also watch probably a more in-depth review on my last book video. It's about Selin, who goes to Harvard in the 90s. She studies Russian literature and linguistics, and she falls in love with Ivan, who's a math major and also a senior, so 4 years older than her. There's so many quirky observations about language, so much like stream of consciousness in her monologue, secondhand embarrassment, but in the best way. I just found her so relatable. Another really great coming of age story. It really is, like I said last time, and if you get it, you get it book. The girls that get it book. And I got it. I really did. Maybe that's a me problem, but I really did. Loved it so much. The final book I want to talk about today so far, again, I will probably do like 500 sequels to this video because I'm constantly finding new books that absolutely changed my world. But this one is The Great Believers by Rebecca, still don't know how to say her name. This is kind of disrespectful at this point, by Rebecca Mackay. This book is the one that I read most recently in November 2023, and wow. This is one of those books that both had me reading until 1 in the morning, had me questioning my life and what I was doing with my life, and left me sobbing, which if a book makes me cry, that means something. So this book is another dual timeline. The first perspective is that of Yale, a gay man in the 1980s living in Chicago during the AIDS crisis. He works at Northwestern, kind of curating art. So the second perspective is that of Fiona, who knew and was close to Yale 30 years before, but now it's in 2015, and she is in Paris searching for her long-lost daughter. This book started off a little bit slow, and then you get to one point in the book, and if you read it, you know what I'm talking about, where you cannot stop reading. All I wanted to do the month of November was read this book. It absolutely was heartbreaking, heart aching, made me want to throw it across the room in frustration, but so beautiful. It is extremely sad, so if you don't want a tearjerker, don't read this book, but it was absolutely gorgeously written in a way that was, like I said, tragic, but didn't feel exploitative in the least. Obviously, I knew about the AIDS crisis prior to reading this book, but The Great Believers really made me kind of fully realize how much of an impact it had on everybody who was affected by it, but especially on the gay community. I don't know what else to say. Like, it's one of those books where you kind of know it's gonna happen, but you pray it doesn't happen, and it happens anyways, which is not a spoiler. It's just, you just know. But honestly, this is one of those only books where there were two perspectives, and I was equally engaged in both perspectives. I found both Yale and Fiona to be extremely likable, extremely, how do I say this? I was extremely moved by both of their stories. I think Rebecca Mackay did such a masterful job of dealing with this tragedy, but also finding light in the tragedy. Honestly, if I think about it too much, I'm gonna start crying again. It's just so moving. I think that is all for me today. Like I said, I'm so sorry if this video was all over the place because I was just going out of my heart. I had no notes, no outline, no blueprint, no nothing. I hope you found at least one new recommendation if any of these books struck your fancy. I'm telling you that they are all so worth reading. Let me know if you have any suggestions for me because I'm always looking for new book suggestions. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I will try to do more book videos in the future. Again, let me know if you have any suggestions for book-related videos. Thank you so much.